Good morning and welcome to Wild Things 2023. I'm Amy Dahl of Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves. It's great to be in the room with the thousands of us who have come together today to celebrate the plants, animals, ecosystems, and people of the Prairie State. Both Wild Things and the Illinois Nature Preserve system originate from the same headwaters of activism, stewardship, and curiosity. And so we are honoring our Nature Preserve's 60th anniversary at this year's Wild Things. As we begin, I invite you to pause to consider that today may change you. So let's all take a collective deep breath. Let's shake off the stress of traffic and parking and ask 3 questions. How will I be inspired today? What connections will I make with new people, new ideas, and new knowledge? Am I ready to possibly change the way I think and act? Indeed, Wild Things is about the mingling of people, the passing and sharing of knowledge, and recommitting ourselves to our enduring legacy of caring for natural areas. Thus, it's really exciting this morning to welcome so many students in attendance. So students, if you're here as a student, could you raise your hand? The students here they represent approximately 10% of attendees here today at Wild Things. And who deserves the credit for putting together Wild Things? This conference happens because many people started the work of planning many, many months ago. There are over 250 speakers here today to share their knowledge and experience with us. More than a dozen track shepherds curated the sessions that we'll hear today. Over 80 volunteers will make sure this day runs smoothly. So when you have a question today, look for one of them in a green volunteer vest to find an answer. A steering committee began meeting and planning many months ago. Edward Warden, Catherine Acutera, Deanna Detterling, Tori Cunningham, Rob Telfer, Jillian Neese, Sarah Singh, and Heather McLean, with Linda Masters chairing our team and dedicating countless hours to pulling us all together today. Let's give them a round of applause. The steering committee wanted to keep this conference as affordable as possible, and to that end, many sponsors stepped up. We would especially like to thank the Bobolink Foundation for sponsoring today, as well as the Nature Conservancy for funding and organizing the Wild Things scholarships. And a profound thank you to our presenting sponsor, the Forest Preserves of Cook County. They have been an institutional leader in conservation from the start. And it is my honor to introduce the General Superintendent of the Forest Preserves of Cook County, Arnold Randall.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning. It is really a pleasure to be here with you today. This is an awesome event, and there's so many people here, which is awesome. So it's good to see you all in person, and we are really thrilled to be here. I want to recognize a couple of Forest Preserve folks. There are a lot of Forest Preserve of Cook County staff here who are going to be presenting and participating in the activities, but I also want to recognize one of our Forest Preserve commissioners, Josina Marita, who is a newer commissioner, but all involved, so thank you, Commissioner. Awesome. And I want to recognize a couple of members of our Conservation and Policy Council who really help guide us. And I want to recognize Henrietta Saunders and Laurel Ross. Okay. Awesome. So signing on as the presenting sponsor for Wild Things was pretty much an easy decision for us. This event is to learn more about natural spaces here in Illinois and how to care for them and how to enjoy them. That connection between people and nature is at the core of the Forest Preserve's mission. The Forest Preserves of Cook County is the oldest and largest urban forest preserve system in the country. Our origin story begins more than 100 years ago. At the start of the 20th century, it was clear that Chicago was fast becoming one of the world's great cities. To visionary leaders like Dwight Perkins and Jens Jensen, it was also clear that the region's beautiful landscapes would inevitably be lost to farming, houses, factories, strip malls, all those things. They didn't anticipate strip malls, but we all knew that this development was going to be a problem. But they had an audacious idea: create an emerald necklace of public land around Chicago and protect these natural wonders and the wildlife that call them home, and connect them to connect the public to the natural world. Today, the forest preserves of Cook County consists of nearly 70,000 acres, or 11% of the county footprint. Because of the forest preserves, you can still go to places in a county with 5.2 million residents where trees and grasslands are all you can see, stretching into the horizon. Places where you can see wild animals on a walk through the woods, mostly coyotes and things like that, and deer, a lot of deer. Or you can listen to the sound of a running stream, which I actually did yesterday at one of our nature centers. Crabtree was pretty awesome. And a background chorus of chirping insects. Many of these themes and key messages that you will hear at today's presentations echo what we experience every day at the forest preserves: collaboration. This region is a leader in conservation, and we're lucky to have so many dedicated organizations here. The Forest Preserves is a founding member of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance. Chicago Wilderness, give a hand for them because it's a pretty awesome organization. And we, the Forest Preserves, are more effective organizations because of the many partnerships with other local county forest preserves and groups like the Shedd Aquarium, the Field Museum, Audubon Great Lakes, the Bobolink Foundation, and many, many others. Volunteerism. I know a lot of you are volunteers. For decades, volunteer stewards have been doing the work to bring back healthy native habitats across the forest preserves, and not just us, but across the region. Over the last decade, we've expanded volunteer opportunities from litter cleanup to community science. This is another kind of collaboration, a much appreciated and critical resource for us at the forest preserves. And I know that so many other natural areas as well. So not just the forest preserves in Cook County, but lots of places depend on volunteers. You're the lifeblood. Science and data. Our ecological restoration initiatives at the Forest Preserves are guided by our Natural and Cultural Resources Master Plan, created in conjunction with the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois. And the work is informed by the type of best practices that you'll be learning about today. I'm proud to say that in some cases, our work is creating those best practices. Perseverance. Creating the structures and support to protect nature is not always easy. There are always obstacles, and there are always people thinking that the land could be used for something else. The approval of the Forest Preserve District of Cook County by the Illinois State Legislature back in 1914 was a product of more than a decade of work with many setbacks along the way. More recently, the Forest Preserves faced chronic budget shortfall that was severely limiting our ability to reach our goals for restoration, acquiring new land, and offering more outreach aimed at equity, inclusion, and more. It took years to find a solution, but last November, the Forest Preserves Board of Commissioners put a referendum on the ballot. Thank you. They put a referendum on the ballot for the Cook County voters to raise the property tax by 1/4 of 1/10 of 1%. 1/4 of 1/10 of 1% as an investment in the forest preserves. For an average homeowner in Cook County, the additional cost would be about $20 a year annual on their property tax bill. Now, that's not a lot, but it's a lot to us. I can tell you, it turns out to be quite a bit of money. But it's never easy to ask voters to vote to raise their taxes. Not only did the measure pass, as you know, it did so overwhelmingly with 69% of the vote. It's really impressive. We had amazing advocacy support from a coalition of more than 130 nonprofits, businesses, and civic groups that was led by organizations like Friends of the Forest Preserves, Open Lands, the Trust for Public Land, the Nature Conservancy, and many more, and I want to thank them all publicly again. Thank you for your leadership and support. More than anything, however, I think the results show that people appreciate nature probably more than ever. They want to be able to get out and experience it. They know that it makes our region a better, healthier place to live, and they want to preserve it for generations to come. So thank you to Amy and all the organizers of Wild Things to bring us here together. Yeah, I think you're going to have a wonderful day, I really do. And it's great to be back here. Thanks to all the people presenting and about what they've learned and how to best protect the natural world here in Illinois. And that includes many members of the staff of the Forest Preserves, as I mentioned earlier. So again, thank you all for coming out, and I'm looking forward to a great day with you. Thanks.
you so much, Arnold. As you shared here, it is very clear that people care about natural areas. The referendum in Cook County, I think, demonstrated that in Cook County. But we know that the citizens of counties with forest preserves and conservation districts have repeatedly chosen to increase their own taxes because they know that clean air, clean water, biodiversity, and access to it for all people is important for us now and for enduring generations. 60 years ago this year, Illinois led the nation, even the world, in creating an ambitious and collaborative model for protecting our remaining natural areas with the advent of the Illinois Nature Preserve System. This visionary model that many other states have followed celebrates its 60th anniversary this year. And as Wild Things helps kick off this anniversary year, we celebrate the more than 600 Illinois nature preserves and the staff and volunteers who care for them. But what even is a nature preserve? What makes a nature preserve so special? One definition of a nature preserve: biodiversity conservation areas permanently protected by their owners and permanently protected by state law. That's true enough, but it doesn't really tell us the story of what makes these places so important and so special. 60 years ago, Illinois recognized the plight of our natural areas sooner than most other states. Unlike areas east that had already been transformed, there were still quality remnant natural areas remaining here. They were unplowed, unpaved, with the biodiversity still remaining in the plants, the soil, the fungi, the microbes. And this realization, and with persistent advocacy by people, the Natural Areas Preservation Act was passed in 1963. And I don't read a lot of Illinois state laws for inspiration or for fun, but no matter how often I read it, the Natural Areas Preservation Act still moves me. And I'm not going to read the whole law to you this morning, but I am going to read a little bit. I'm going to read my favorite part to you. Natural lands and waters, together with the plants and animals living thereon in natural communities, are a part of the heritage of the people. They are of value for scientific research, for teaching, as reservoirs of natural materials, not all of the potential uses of which are now known, as habitats for rare and vanishing species, as places of historic and natural interest and scenic beauty, and as living museums of the native landscape, wherein one may envision and experience primeval conditions in a wilderness-like environment. Does it give you shivers? Do you feel the passion with which this was written? Do you start to glimpse what makes our Illinois nature preserves so special? Their highest, best, and most important use for the public benefit is to be preserved for their quality as a natural area, not as a resource to be harvested, not for recreation, simply because of the natural area that they are, for us now and for generations to come. And nature preserves are dedicated by the landowner. Nature preserve status is not a designation. It's not imposed upon the land by the state. It's a choice. Nature preserve status is a dedication. It's a choice made by the landowner for the land to be protected in perpetuity, protected forever, an enduring legacy as heritage of the people. And Illinois led the way 60 years ago. As the steering committee met and planned for this year's conference, we were inspired by the Nature Preserve anniversary, and we asked what keynote speaker could address those 60 years of vision and challenges and biodiversity conservation success. But there's no one person. Conservation, as it has developed here, is a community. It's government agencies and non-for-profits. It's professionals and volunteers. It's embodied in this room. Thus, our keynote is not one speaker, but three contributors from different perspectives. So Arnold Randall will join me back on stage, along with John Rogner and Tori Cunningham for this panel discussion. So let's welcome them back up to the stage. So as they make their way on stage, I want to let you know that we're missing one panel member today, Arthur Pearson, who is to talk about George and Barbara Fell and the drama of their successful campaign to establish the Illinois Nature Preserve system, is not able to make it today. But 60 years later, we'll be honoring Barbara and George in various ways today throughout our conference.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce our panelists before I have a seat with them here. Arnold Randall has led the forest preserves of Cook County for 12 years. And in that time, the agency has become a more transparent and strategic government entity with an increased focus on restoring and protecting Cook County's most precious natural areas. John Rogner was for many years the chair of the Chicago Wilderness Collaboration. He currently serves as the Assistant Director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and has also worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and as a volunteer steward. And Tori Cunningham is a volunteer at Old Plank Road Prairie's Nature Preserve. She organizes events, cuts brush, collects seeds, and bakes beautiful and delicious homemade treats for hungry volunteers. So John, I'm going to start with you. We've heard a lot about the history of the nature preserves and some of the history of natural areas conservation. But I'm wondering, in present day, we're talking a lot about the 30 by 30 movement, protecting 30% of our land and waters by the year 2030. And I'm wondering if you can tell us how the Illinois nature preserves fit in with that vision of 30 by 30.
Well, thank you, Amy. And let me tell you, I did get shivers from you reading that segment of the Illinois Natural Areas Preservation Act. It read like poetry, and that had to be George Fell's influence through that. But yeah, let me say a word about 30 by 30. And Arnold, you referred to the necklace of green space as an audacious goal. I call 30 by 30 a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's an imperative. It's something we absolutely have to do. And what we mean by 30 by 30 is conserving 30% of the planet's lands and waters by 2030 on our way to protecting 50% by 2050. So think about that. The idea comes from none other than the late E.O. Wilson, the great ecologist E.O. Wilson. He wrote a book not long before he passed away called Half Earth. And he drew upon his years of thinking and writing about the theory of island biogeography, and that gets kind of wonky, so I won't talk more about that. But the bottom line is he proposed that we could save 80% of the living resources of planet Earth by saving 50% of the land area. And considering the extent of the human presence over the planet and the impact we've had, that's not a bad thing to strive for, saving 80% of the living things on our planet. So that some scientists took that and ran with it and came up as an interim goal 30 by 30, because you got to be able to mark progress toward it. That idea was reinforced recently at the UN Biodiversity Conference in December, where 200 countries signed on to that notion to conserve 30% of the land and water area by 2030. That was stepped down to the United States by the Biden administration, and that initiative is called America the Beautiful. And it raised a bit of a stir, initially, but it's got some traction, it's got some legs, and a couple of states have started to have those conversations at the state level, Illinois being one of them. And so last year we held a series of listening sessions. We listened to you all and many others across the state, many organizations, and captured your thoughts on that. So I want to say a word about 30 by 30 and the focal areas of those. Really, it's intended to address two related issues. One is biodiversity loss, And you've probably heard it said that the Earth is in the 6th major extinction episode. At the very front end of it, we could forestall that if we do the right thing, but it's real, and so we need to protect the remaining biodiversity, of which Illinois and northeastern Illinois in particular is rich in that. The second thing we have to deal with, that 30 by 30 is intended to address, is runaway climate change. The nice thing about, what you hear mostly about climate change is we got to stop emitting CO2 into the air, and that's the thing you hear most about, and that is critical. But a companion to that is we have to protect nature, because it pulls carbon dioxide out of the air and stores it in the soil and in its biomass. So the twin threats, biodiversity loss and climate change, are what 30 by 30 is intended to address. So if you're going to preserve biodiversity, and you can't just sort of randomly pick the sites that you're going to protect so that it adds up to 30%. You have to focus first on those hot spots, the places that are the repositories of biodiversity, the places where we find all of Leopold's cogs and wheels that make up the machinery of the land mechanism. We have to save every cog and wheel. It's the first precaution of intelligent tinkering on the landscape, right, in his words. So we have to focus on those hot spots, and where are those hot spots? They're in what we call the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory sites, of which quite a few of those, maybe 40% of them, have been now dedicated as nature preserves, so they're going to be critical. Maybe I'll just stop there, but that's, I've kind of rambled on quite a while here. Let's go on to the next one.
Then I'm going to follow up with that. And, you talked about our nature preserves as a repository, that we need to save every cog and wheel. And the Natural Areas Preservation Act is the law that sets up our nature preserves, and that's the tool by which we can save those. So is there a way that the nature preserves laws could be strengthened, should be strengthened? Are they just right the way that they are? How do we in this room help make sure that we are saving every cog and wheel with the tools and resources available? No pressure.
So I've thought about that, and I'm going to say it's just right. Legally, it's the highest form of land protection under Illinois state law. It can't be condemned. Nobody can appropriate it through condemnation or other means. That's why even within governmental or land management agencies like Cook County and the Illinois DNR, we dedicate lands on our own property so that nobody gets any bright ideas about running roads or doing or converting them to other kinds of uses. So the law itself is very tough. It can only there can only be an encroachment on a lawful encroachment on a nature preserve through a joint act of the General Assembly and the governor for an imperative public purpose. And I may not have the language exactly right, but that's what it requires. So I think the law is good. George Fell, thinking back all those years, the system that was put into place, it set up a dual sort of form of governance for the nature preserve system. It set up an independent commission appointed by the governor, and they sort of oversee the day-to-day governance of the nature preserve system. But then within DNR, Department of Conservation at the time, now the DNR, it challenged us with coming up with staff and budget to support the nature preserve system. And that was not preferred by George Fell. It was something he was forced to live with. He didn't think that provided enough independence for the commission, and thought that it would be too subject to politics. All right, so he was overridden, and we did get set up with this dual system, and I think it was the right thing to do. Now, maybe he had the right idea early on. In the early 60s, the DOC at the time was rooted really in two traditions. traditions. One was the hunting and fishing tradition, which persists to this day. It's an important part of what we do. The other major thing was public lands, but mostly for recreation, not for preservation. That really wasn't a broad notion. Now, it had the effect of protecting a lot of important biodiversity, but that wasn't the primary focus, and that's what made him nervous. But the concern even back then was that if you left the commission out there sort of on its own, it would be too subject to political whims, actually, and it's better to embed it within an agency, especially now that we as the DNR, we have fully embraced the mission of the Nature Preserve system. And our Nature Preserve staff work hand in hand with our heritage staff. They're almost indistinguishable in terms of what they do on the landscape. They have become fully integrated into the DNR, and we are able to now defend them in the case of sort of political manipulations. So I would disagree with what George said early on and think that the system that was set up is really the best one right now. Long answer to a short question.
Thanks so much, John. Arnold, I want to return to you, especially based on something that John said about landowning agencies that are already in the world of and the field of protecting conservation spaces are still dedicating nature preserves. So the Cook County Forest Preserves, they dedicated 11 of the 12 first Illinois nature preserves. But you guys are still dedicating nature preserves today. So can you explain why it is that historically nature preserve dedication has been important to the Cook County Forest Preserves?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And let me just say, whenever I sit with John, I still learn a whole lot. So thank you, John. And that's one of the great things about working in this field. It's a constant learning. So yes, the Forest Preserves of Cook County, we're on board very early with this, and thankfully to protect these really important landscapes, and understood 60 years ago, which is impressive and good. So it means we've been doing the right thing in some ways for a long time. And we have 27 total now. So that's a lot, and about a third of those have been protected in the last dozen years or so. So we really have been committed to this. As I mentioned in my comments earlier, there's a constant threat to public lands, and it shouldn't be, but that is a reality that we deal with, and we do a good job of sort of turning that back. But I think understanding that you have these really high quality ecosystems that still exist here in the northeast part of the state, and understanding how rare they are, it's really important to embrace protecting them. And so this gives us another way of protecting these landscapes from bad decisions in the future, right? Somebody who thinks maybe we should do something very different with it. This is sort of the in perpetuity commitment to protecting these ecosystems, and they are phenomenal on their own, just for what they are and what lives there and what exists there. And so it's really important to protect them at that level. We're very proud that we've embraced this, and we'll have more coming forward to propose as well. But I think the more we can protect these places that are unique and special and fragile, the more we need to do that.
So a follow-up question to that, and maybe you can make it a little bit more clear to me and maybe others here in the audience. So if a land is owned by the forest preserves, it is a forest preserve, so it's already has some protection. What's the additional protection, or why then take the extra step to dedicate it as a nature preserve?
So these are the highest quality places. They have to meet. So John mentioned, or you mentioned, this is a volunteer thing you volunteer to, but you have to meet a standard. I can't just say, I'm going to protect a place that we do a lot of boating and trails. It really is a place that meets a certain standard. And we are still governed by a system that allows for elected officials and administrators like myself to make decisions, as it should be. But we want to be true to who we are. So 30 years from now, somebody decides they want to do something very different with a piece of land in the forest preserve, they may have the ability to do that. But if it's an Illinois Nature Preserve, it's going to be what it is in perpetuity. And so that's important to even make. It's making a statement about what's important to us as an organization. recognition that protecting these lands are super important at this very high level. But the more we can protect it, the more you can sort of cross-protect with the state and other places. We're willing to do that, and it's really making the case. And I would say, the Forest Preserves of Cook County, for example, operated differently 20 years ago, and maybe didn't think as some things were as important as we think they are today. And we want to sort of lead this and make this a statement that this is what we're about.
Thanks. Conversation, but some of the things that have come up, you brought up INAI sites, and we've been talking about the difference between a designation and a dedication. So if there's an INAI site, could you explain what that means and why an INAI site is different? How is an INAI site different than other open space, but also different from a nature preserve? Because and while you're thinking about that, I do think it's important, and as you know, we've become more aware there are INAI sites that are threatened to be destroyed, and Arnold talked about that, that we can protect them from politics in the future and future bad decisions. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about what's the difference?
Sure. INAI refers to the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory, and it was first started in the late 1970s. And the idea was that as we started to embrace these new natural heritage functions and focusing on threatened and endangered species protection, we had to find out where these places were. So the first INAI crew that went out started to identify all of these, again, beginning in the late 70s. And we in the DNR have continued to update it. And right now there are about 1,500 or so, roughly, sites on that Illinois Natural Areas Inventory, totaling 500,000 acres about across the state. It sounds like a lot, but compared to the area of Illinois, 37 million acres, it's really not very much, about maybe around 1% or so. But these represent the best examples of natural communities still with their full complement of biodiversity, or they represent areas that have threatened and endangered species on them. We have been able to pull in about, I think, 40% of those INAI sites now under the nature preserves designation, which is really a good start. Obviously, again, tying it back to 30 by 30, we would want to continue to protect the rest of the ones that really deserve it as best we could, recognizing now that these fall where they fall, and they may be on public lands, but many are on private lands. And so we have to work with private landowners in many cases, and we have successfully done that to secure protection, voluntary protection for a lot of those areas as well.
Thanks, John. So, John and Arnold, you've both talked about challenges faced by nature preserves from politics and landowner decisions, but also from kind of encroachment and fragmentation. And I suspect that the founders of the Illinois Nature Preserve System had no way of knowing how much of a challenge the preserves would face from invasives and fragmentation and climate change and all the stressors. And as a result, I think you've both addressed how the system is badly under-resourced. And it's important that we all work together with staff and volunteers. We need to increase funding and staff, be able to recognize the problems, and have more and more volunteerism in the nature preserves, especially trained volunteers, which is why I'm going to turn it to Tori, because Tori joins this panel as part of a team of leaders and stewards who are taking care of an Illinois nature preserve. And she represents a great many of us in this room today. And so I'm going to invite Tori to tell us about her experience and what it's meant to her.
Thank you, Amy. I'm Tori. I am a volunteer steward at Old Plank Road, Prairie in Matson, Illinois. A short overview of that site is that Old Plank Road Nature Trail is a former railroad turned nature trail, and due to the nature of the rail having the fencing on either side of the tracks, there are just really great protected from grazing and agricultural uses of lands between the tracks and the fencing. And my group and I, we take care of a section of 12 remnants in Matson, Illinois. And how I got involved with all of this. So basically, back in October of 2021, I was doom scrolling Reddit, and I came
Hold
across.
on, you were doing what?
Doom scrolling.
Okay.
Doom scrolling. It's when you're really happy about things and you're scrolling through.
Okay, I just wanted to pause
articles.
on that for a second. Okay, carry on.
But in the Illinois subreddit, I actually saw an article about Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves from WTTW. And in the comments of that post on Reddit, I saw the link to the events page. And then I saw the kickoff event for the Old Plank Road Prairie, and I was like, why not? I got into indoor plants like hardcore during the lockdown phase of the pandemic. So I figured these are plants that are a little bit closer than like Malaysia or Borneo. They're in my backyard. And then I also was just looking for something to get out of the house. And this was outdoors, so I felt safe doing it. And so I signed up for the kickoff event, and I attended. And so I didn't really know anything about ecological restoration up until that point, so I just thought it was going to be like garbage cleanup. So I brought like grabbers and like a garbage bag, and then I was met with loppers and saws and fire and seed collecting. So right off the bat, I was learning a lot, which I love, as Arnold mentioned, but and I had a lot more fun than I thought I could, and I decided, this is something I can keep on doing. And so I signed up for the next work days, and I kept on attending. And then that December of 2021, I was at Lingham Island in Kankakee. On top of that, I also participated in prescribed burns at Skokie National Park, and also at OPR, Old Plank Road itself. And little by little, I kept on getting pulled in. I kept on learning more. I kept on, no matter which site I went to, I kept on meeting amazing people, an amazing community, always feeling welcomed. And, time passed, and at OPR, we started doing strategy meetings, and I was like, yeah, I've been volunteering there a lot, I can do strategy meetings. And then all of a sudden they were like, okay, so we need maybe we should choose leaders for certain sites or certain work days. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. Wait, Tori, the self-proclaimed introverted hermit, like George Fell maybe, all of a sudden is wanting to be a leader of something or wanting to be a head of a community. And I was like, what is going on here? And actually, just a few months ago, I was doing my doom scrolling on Reddit, and I came across this article talking about the third place. And the third place is a sociological idea that, so basically you have your home, which is the first place, and then you have your work, which is the second place, and then there's this third place. And what this third place is it's a lot, but basically it provides qualities that not only give this third place a unique presence in your life, but it also supports and further bolsters your first life, your home, and your second life, your work. And as I mentioned, there's a bunch to it, but to keep it short, there's 3 points that personally I feel are important for my experience and how I've come to this conclusion. And the first one, or the 3 are leveling, the crucial regulars, and then lighthearted mood. And then the first leveling is the fact that anyone of any skill type, any day, like anyone can come and join a work day, and you will have just as much experience, you will have just as much learning as anyone that has done it 500 times. You will be just as welcomed, and it's no matter where you come from, what you do, like you are welcome. I actually, with the baking, I guess I help with leveling. I didn't realize I did this, but because I love to bake, I always do like a full baked good, so like all the sugar and fat and milk and all that. And then I always do a gluten-free and vegan, just in case if anyone comes that volunteers with dietary restrictions, I want to make sure they're involved when I have my big treats. So leveling. And then the next important one is the crucial regulars. And regulars are the people that are pretty much always there, and they set the overall mood of the workday or the event or what's going on. And they also pay special attention to any newcomers to make sure that they feel that leveling right away, and also to make sure that they got a pair of loppers in hand. If they want to collect seed, let's go collect seed. That they're just as involved as the people that have been there for a long time. And I would just like to give a special shout out to the regulars at my site: Adam, Justin, Athena, Jeff, Colin, Artis, Pat. I think I got everyone. And then honorary regulars. No, these are Amy. and Stephen and Eriko and Christos and Katie and Kim, wherever you guys are. I just want to mark you guys as honorary regulars, just because you guys were the regulars before we became the regulars, and we kind of were taking that baton and continuing forward, so we can pass it on to future regulars, hopefully. But and then the third and final point, well, it's final, I think it's really the most important point to me, and especially over the past few years, kind of the public discourse of it all, really the lighthearted mood. And obviously, some days are a bit more dangerous, like prescribed burn days, or when you have sawyers on site, you know, you don't want to be going around like juggling chainsaws and, you know, having fun that way. But no matter what, there is that level of fun felt. There isn't the juggling chainsaws, but there is that fun felt. And like the first day I ever did it to every single day I do it now, I have that same feeling. And I think it's just amazing. And I think the reason why all of these factors can even take part is because of the thousands of hours and hundreds of people, all of you here today, over the dozens of years to set this foundation, from George Fell to today to everyone here on stage. It's just, we have such an amazing effort that has collected into this ability to become a part of the community, to be a community, not just volunteering or teaching or, you know, having a job or whatever. It's really this third place, this part of my home, I guess. So, thank you.
Great.
Can I join you at a work day sometime?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, yes, please. Would you have any special requests for a baked good?
I'm easy.
I decorate really good sugar cookies.
Thank you, Tori. I think that this, as so many of our community organizations struggle to keep people involved and connected, when we think about what's happening to our civic organizations and organized religion and those numbers dropping, thinking about the need that we have as people for having this third place, and the way that you've talked about this, it's about it being part of the ecological restoration and health of our nature preserves, but also the health of us as people is so important for us in the future. And so thank you for sharing that, Tori. So we have a few minutes left that we're gonna wrap up. So this seems like the crowd where I can take some inspiration from NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to ask our panelists to tell us what their vision is for nature and nature preserves 60 years from now. But before they do that, in true NPR style, I have a list of announcements that I need to make. So they get some time to think, and I need to make some announcements about the rest of our day together. So here's the announcements that you need to know. When we wrap up here in this room, we're going to ask that everybody move out of this room, because the staff here at the Stevens Center are going to be moving walls around and taking a few minutes to prepare it for breakout sessions for the rest of the day. So the round tables in the back of the room are going to be left up all day long. They will be space for you to gather, to network, and to socialize, and to have lunch. And so they will be up all day. For those of you that ordered them, space at 12:30, and they'll be at the round tables there at the back of the room. Authors will be signing books at the book table from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and that will be back at the registration area, so you can watch for them there. Happy hour and the poster session will be back in this room, back at where the round tables are, and that starts at 5 p.m. But the posters are on display all day long in this back hallway, this hallway over here, so you should take a walk through them when you get a chance today. One more attendee flying through the air. If you have questions throughout the day, you're going to look for the volunteers wearing the green vests. If you're joining us for happy hour at the end of the day and you haven't purchased a drink ticket yet, or if you're going to need a second drink ticket, you can get these at the information desk. There are some limited T-shirts for sale from previous year's conference. That's available at the information desk. Also, if you weren't listening, you were distracted by a bird, or I was talking too fast, information for the day can be found in your program or by scanning, if you scan the QR code that is located on the signage throughout our space, that will link you to the information about the conference. There is one more announcement that was given to me last minute, and it's written down here on my note. So somebody from the parking garage driving a Chevy Spark. I'm assuming that is someone from our conference and not from the golf conference, but it could be a golfer. Your dome light was left on, and your license plate is AU 41984. You may want to go check that, or there will be no Spark in your car later. Okay, and with that, I am going to turn back to our panelists and ask them to tell us what their vision is for nature and nature preserves 60 years from now, and I will start with you.
How we manage the land has become a very big part of what we do. There were years where we were planting trees that didn't fit, and we were not doing restoration, and our volunteers, again, led the way on that. So we have to thank them for having the vision that a government organization didn't have, however many years ago that was. So when I got here 12 years ago, we were managing about 1,500 acres for ecological restoration. We're doing 15,000 today, actively managing 15,000, and we should be managing a lot more. Our next century conservation plan says we should be managing 30,000 for actively, and I think 60 years from now that number should be much higher, and we should have a lot more preserves. Land is expensive, so we won't be able to get to 90 or 100,000, but we can do more.
You just got all this money.
We just got all this money. Land is expensive, but we're doing a lot, and we do have very active goals for acquiring more land as well, specifically. I do think the other part is the people part. So we know we've tried to be this way from the beginning, and we've embedded this in our work now, but we know that the people who live in Cook County is a very diverse group of people, and that's not always reflected in nature, and that's not just a Cook County thing, that's not just a Illinois thing, that's a countrywide thing. The people of different backgrounds don't always feel welcome, and so our job is to make sure that they do feel welcome and that we find ways to reach into communities, and we're doing that, and we want to do more of that. I want to encourage all of you to do that, to encourage folks who don't look like we do to come out and participate and enjoy nature, because at the end of the day for people, it's a quality of life issue. We all do better when we spend time in nature. My week this week was being downtown a couple of days, but it was also being out in nature a couple of days, and you can guess which days were better days, right? So we really feel strongly, and we put into our planning, how do we connect with a more diverse group of people to make sure that they enjoy nature and participate in nature as much as everybody else. So that's the big push for us.
All right, John, share with us your vision for 60 years from now for nature and nature preserves.
All right, and full disclosure, we were given this question before this meeting, so I was last night at midnight, I wrote out a few thoughts, so they may not be all that coherent. I was a little cross-eyed by then, but here we go.
Just so you know, I gave you the question before last night at midnight, so it's not my fault.
Full disclosure, I didn't think about it until midnight last night. All right, so in 60 years, Illinois will have been part of a global reconciliation with nature. The twin crises of biodiversity loss and a warming world will have sent us looking for nature-based solutions and finding them in our own suite of local plants and animals. We will have long since achieved protection and management of the remnants identified through the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory, and we will have woven them into networks of natural land laced through the places where we live, work, and play. Through restoration, nature will be abundantly available and accessible to people from the most densely populated urban centers to the rural hinterlands, which are now farmed in ways that rebuild soils, maintain clean water, sustain pollinators, and grow a rich diversity of healthful food. We will have achieved a culture of conservation.
Thank you. I think your midnight vision was very inspirational. Tori, can you tell us about what your vision is for 60 years from now for nature and nature preserves?
60 years from now, I hope that this idea that it is, truly for literally everybody, this is a third place. This is something that everyone can find benefit from and can grow and learn with, and that it's that it's not just seen as volunteering or, a referendum. Like, it is a part of all of our lives that can really help and enrich everything, everything that you touch. And if I may throw a personal goal in there, that I know at least maybe half as much as the presenters I'm going to see today, because, wow. So I think 60 years is a good timeline for that, right? Okay.
I think that's a great timeline.
Thank you.
All right, and if any of that starts to happen, we'll tell you about it at Wild Things 2025. So before we leave the room, I would like to do a selfie with this group on stage and all of you with this background. And my kids aren't here to take it for me, so I'm going to do my best. But if we can do a selfie, that would be great. And then we're all going to go learn in just a second. So hold on, get ready to do a selfie. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists and thank them. What's that?
I'd like to put an announcement.
Oh, yes.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy the conference at all, you have to thank Amy Dow for helping put it on, as well as Jillian Neese, who's probably not even in this room right now, and Linda Masters, of course. And if you have any complaints, tell it to the bird. All right, thank you all.